Marcus Williams never thought his life would change because of a pair of broken glasses and a stubborn colonel who refused to listen. At 28, he had been working as a supply officer at Edwards Air Force Base for 3 years. Every morning, he would wake up at 5:30, put on his pressed uniform, and walk to the supply depot where he managed inventory for experimental aircraft projects. The other officers called him Four Eyes behind his back. Not because he wore glasses, but because they thought he was always looking for problems where none existed. Marcus had a habit of questioning things that didn't make sense. When spare parts arrived late, he would call the vendors. When equipment serial numbers didn't match the paperwork, he would investigate until he found the truth. His supervisor, Colonel Richardson, was a large man with a thick mustache who had been in the Air Force for 25 years. The colonel believed that supply officers should stay in their lane and not ask too many questions. He often told Marcus, "Your job is to count boxes and sign papers, not to think." But Marcus couldn't help thinking. He noticed patterns that others missed. He saw connections between seemingly unrelated events. Most importantly, he had an unusual talent that nobody knew about yet. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in March when a shipment of engine parts arrived for the F-16 Fighting Falcon project. The delivery truck pulled up to the loading dock at exactly 8 o'clock. Marcus was there to check the inventory, clipboard in hand, when he noticed something strange. The driver was nervous. He kept looking over his shoulder and checking his watch. When Marcus approached to verify the delivery, the man practically threw the paperwork at him and drove away without waiting for a signature. Marcus examined the boxes carefully. Everything looked normal on the outside. The shipping labels were correct. The weights seemed right, but something felt wrong. He had learned to trust his instincts over the years. Inside the depot, he opened the first box. The parts looked genuine, but Marcus noticed tiny scratches on the metal surfaces that shouldn't have been there. New parts didn't have wear marks. He opened another box and found the same thing. When he brought his concerns to Colonel Richardson, the older man barely looked up from his coffee. "Williams, those parts passed inspection at the factory. They have all the right certifications. Stop creating problems where none exist." "But, sir, these parts show signs of previous use. I think we might have received refurbished components instead of new ones." Colonel Richardson's face turned red. "Are you questioning the integrity of our suppliers? These are trusted contractors who have worked with the military for decades. Your job is to receive the parts and distribute them, not to play detective." Marcus knew better than to argue further, but he couldn't let it go. That evening, after his shift ended, he stayed behind to examine the parts more closely. Using a magnifying glass from the office supplies, he studied the metal surfaces under a bright lamp. What he found made his stomach sink. Hidden beneath a thin layer of new coating, he could see stress fractures in the metal. These weren't just used parts, they were potentially dangerous components that could fail during flight. He documented everything with photographs and detailed notes. The next morning, he presented his findings to Colonel Richardson again. This time, he brought evidence. "Sir, I need you to look at these photos. These stress fractures could cause catastrophic failure if these parts are installed in active aircraft." The colonel glanced at the photos for exactly 3 seconds. "Williams, you're seeing things that aren't there. These parts meet all specifications. I'm ordering you to process them for distribution immediately." "But what if I'm right? What if a pilot gets hurt because we installed defective parts? What if you're wrong and you're wasting taxpayer money by rejecting perfectly good components? Follow orders, Williams." "That's final." Marcus felt trapped. He knew he was right, but he also knew that disobeying a direct order would end his career. He spent the rest of the day in a fog, mechanically processing paperwork, while his mind raced with possibilities. That evening, he called his older brother Jake, who worked as a civilian aircraft mechanic in Los Angeles. Without mentioning specific details or classified information, Marcus described the situation in general terms. "Trust your gut. Jake told him. "I've seen too many accidents that could have been prevented if someone had spoken up. There are channels you can use if your immediate supervisor won't listen." The next day, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of distributing the questionable parts, he quietly set them aside and filled out an incident report. He bypassed Colonel Richardson and sent the report directly to the base safety inspector. Within hours, Marcus found himself sitting in the colonel's office, facing a disciplinary hearing. Colonel Richardson was furious. Two other officers flanked him, both looking stern and disappointed. "Officer Williams," the colonel began, "you have deliberately disobeyed a direct order and gone outside the chain of command. This is grounds for immediate dismissal from service." Marcus took a deep breath. "Sir, I believe I have a duty to ensure flight safety above all other considerations. If I'm wrong about these parts, I accept full responsibility. But if I'm right, we could prevent a serious accident." "You're not qualified to make that determination," snapped one of the other officers. "Leave the engineering to the engineers and the supply work to supply officers." The hearing lasted 2 hours. Marcus presented his evidence calmly and thoroughly. He showed the photographs of the stress fractures. He explained his reasoning step by step. He answered every question honestly, even when the answers made him look insubordinate. At the end, Colonel Richardson leaned back in his chair. "Officer Williams, you have 24 hours to reconsider your position. You can withdraw your report, distribute the parts as ordered, and receive only a written reprimand. Or you can stand by your accusations and face a formal investigation that will likely end your military career. Choose wisely." Marcus walked out of the office, feeling like the loneliest person on the base. Other officers avoided eye contact with him. Word had spread quickly about his confrontation with the colonel. Some people whispered that he was a troublemaker. Others said he was just trying to get attention. That night, Marcus sat in his small apartment off base, staring at the photographs of the defective parts. He thought about his father, who had served in Vietnam and always told him that doing the right thing was more important than doing the easy thing. He thought about the pilots who trusted that every component in their aircraft had been properly inspected. He made his choice. The next morning, Marcus walked into Colonel Richardson's office and submitted a formal written statement standing by his original report. He also requested that the parts in question be sent to an independent laboratory for detailed metallurgical analysis. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Williams," the colonel said coldly. "I hope your principles keep you warm when you're looking for a new job." Marcus left the office knowing that he had probably just destroyed his military career. But he also knew that he had done the right thing. What he didn't know was that his decision would soon reveal a corruption scandal that reached far beyond Edwards Air Force Base, and that his unusual ability to spot problems would soon be put to a test that would make him a legend. 3 days after Marcus submitted his formal report, everything changed. He was sitting at his desk trying to focus on routine paperwork when 2 men in dark suits walked into the supply depot. They flashed federal credentials and asked to speak with him privately. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. The parts Marcus had questioned were sent to a military laboratory where metallurgical experts confirmed his suspicions. The components were indeed refurbished units that had been disguised as new parts. Worse, the stress fractures he had spotted would have likely caused critical failures within 50 to 100 flight hours. Within a week, federal investigators had uncovered a complex fraud scheme involving the supplier, several military contractors, and, unfortunately, Colonel Richardson himself. The colonel had been receiving kickbacks for approving substandard parts deliveries. The scheme had been running for almost 2 years. Marcus found himself transformed from potential scapegoat to key witness. The same officers who had laughed at him now treated him with nervous respect. Colonel Richardson was arrested and faced court-martial proceedings. The supplier lost all military contracts and faced federal charges. But the real surprise came when Marcus was called to a meeting with General Patricia Hawkins, the base commander. He had never spoken directly to the general before and was nervous as he knocked on her office door. General Hawkins was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. She had been one of the first female pilots in the Air Force and had a reputation for being both brilliant and demanding. "Officer Williams," she said, gesturing for him to sit down, "I've been reading your file. Your actions prevented what could have been multiple aircraft failures and possible loss of life. The Air Force owes you a debt of gratitude." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I was just doing my job, ma'am." "No. You were doing much more than your job. You saw patterns that trained engineers missed. You spotted problems that sophisticated inspection systems failed to catch. That tells me you have an unusual talent." The general opened a classified folder on her desk. "I want to offer you an opportunity. We have a special program here at Edwards that might interest you. It's called Project Keen Eye, and it involves testing experimental surveillance and reconnaissance systems." Marcus listened as the general explained the program. The Air Force was developing new technologies to help pilots spot enemy aircraft and missiles from extreme distances. They needed people with exceptional visual perception and pattern recognition abilities to help test and refine these systems. "The work is classified," General Hawkins continued. "You would receive special training and work directly with test pilots and engineers. Your ability to notice details that others miss could help save pilots' lives in combat situations." Marcus accepted the assignment immediately. Within a month, he found himself in a completely different world. Instead of counting inventory in a warehouse, he was sitting in specialized testing facilities, working with cutting-edge radar and optical systems. The other members of Project Keen Eye were an unusual group. There was Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant engineer who had designed some of the Air Force's most advanced sensor systems. Captain Mike Rodriguez was a test pilot with over 1,000 hours in experimental aircraft. Technical Sergeant Lisa Park was a former air traffic controller who could track dozens of aircraft simultaneously in her head. Marcus's job was to test new visual identification systems by spotting and tracking aircraft during flight tests. He would sit in a control room, watching multiple screens while aircraft flew complex maneuvers at various distances and altitudes. His task was to identify aircraft types, track their movements, and spot any unusual behavior or potential problems. At first, the other team members were skeptical. Marcus had no formal training in aircraft identification beyond basic supply officer requirements. But within days, he was identifying aircraft at distances that amazed even the experienced pilots. Dr. Chen was particularly impressed. "Marcus, you're consistently spotting aircraft at ranges that are at the theoretical limit of human visual acuity. How are you doing it?" Marcus struggled to explain. "I'm not really seeing the aircraft clearly at those distances. I'm seeing changes in the background. Tiny variations in light patterns, small movements that don't belong. It's like the aircraft creates a ghost image before you can actually see it clearly." That's when Captain Rodriguez started calling him Ghost Eye. The nickname stuck, and soon everyone on the project was using it. The real test came during a major exercise designed to simulate combat conditions. Multiple aircraft from different bases would participate in mock aerial battles, while Marcus and his team tracked them using various sensor systems. The exercise began at dawn on a clear Tuesday morning. Marcus was positioned in the primary observation post with Dr. Chen and Captain Rodriguez. Multiple screens showed feeds from different sensor systems, while large windows provided direct visual observation of the test range. 12 aircraft were participating in the exercise, including several experimental planes that were still classified. Marcus's job was to track all aircraft movements and identify any potential safety issues. 20 minutes into the exercise, Marcus noticed something that made him lean forward in his chair. On the horizon, at the very edge of visual range, he saw something that didn't belong. "Dr. Chen," he said quietly, I'm seeing something unusual at bearing 270, approximately 40 kilometers out. Dr. Chen checked her radar screens. I'm not showing anything on sensors at that location. Marcus grabbed binoculars and focused on the area. There's definitely something there. It's moving fast, much faster than our test aircraft. Captain Rodriguez took the binoculars and looked for himself. After a minute, he shook his head. I don't see anything, Ghost Eye. Are you sure? Marcus was sure, but he couldn't explain why. The object was too far away to see clearly, but he could sense its presence through tiny changes in the atmospheric haze and light patterns. Whatever it is, it's approaching our test range at high speed, Marcus said. If it maintains its current course, it will intersect with our aircraft in approximately 8 minutes. Dr. Chen began running calculations on her computer, while Captain Rodriguez radioed the exercise controller. Within minutes, the word came back. No civilian or military aircraft were scheduled in that area. As the minutes passed, Marcus continued tracking the unknown object. His estimates of its speed and course proved accurate, even though no one else could see it yet. Finally, at a distance of about 15 kilometers, the object became visible to others through binoculars. It was moving incredibly fast, much faster than conventional aircraft. All exercise aircraft, unknown contact approaching from the west at high speed, came the voice of the exercise controller over the radio. All aircraft return to base immediately. The unknown object streaked through the test range at an altitude of about 30,000 feet. It was moving so fast that it was visible for only a few seconds before disappearing toward the east. Later analysis would show that the object had been traveling at approximately Mach 2.5, faster than any known aircraft except for a few highly classified military prototypes. Its flight characteristics didn't match any aircraft in the military database. Marcus had spotted it when it was still over 60 kilometers away, at least 20 minutes before anyone else could detect it. His early warning had allowed all test aircraft to safely clear the area before the unknown object arrived. The incident was classified at the highest levels, but word spread quickly through the project team. Marcus had demonstrated an ability that seemed almost supernatural. His teammates began bringing him more challenging identification tasks, and he consistently exceeded expectations. Dr. Chen started documenting his abilities systematically. Marcus, you're not just seeing better than other people. You're processing visual information in a way that's fundamentally different. You're seeing patterns and making connections that our most advanced computer systems can't match. As word of his abilities spread through the classified community, Marcus found himself invited to participate in increasingly important projects. Test pilots began requesting him specifically for their flights. Engineers wanted his input on new sensor system designs. But the biggest challenge was yet to come. The Air Force was planning to attempt a new speed record, pushing the experimental aircraft to limits never before achieved. They needed someone who could track the aircraft throughout its flight and spot any signs of trouble before conventional instruments could detect them. The aircraft chosen for the record attempt was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The project was so classified that he had to sign additional security agreements just to learn its name. What he was about to witness would test his abilities to their absolute limit and establish his reputation as a legend in the world of experimental flight testing. The aircraft that would make history was codenamed Night Falcon, and it looked like something from a science fiction movie. Marcus first saw it in a heavily guarded hangar at the far end of Edwards Air Force Base, where only personnel with the highest security clearances were allowed. The Night Falcon was sleek and angular, painted in a matte black coating that seemed to absorb light. Its design was unlike any conventional aircraft. Instead of traditional wings, it had a delta-shaped body that blended seamlessly from nose to tail. Most importantly, it was powered by a revolutionary scramjet engine that could theoretically push it to speeds approaching Mach 6. Colonel James Mitchell, The new project commander, who had replaced Colonel Richardson, briefed Marcus on the mission. Colonel Mitchell was the opposite of his predecessor, young, brilliant, and willing to listen to unconventional ideas. "Ghost Eye," he said, using Marcus's nickname without hesitation. "We're attempting to break the absolute speed record for atmospheric flight. The current record stands at Mach 3.3. We believe Night Falcon can reach Mach 5.8, possibly even Mach 6. Marcus studied the aircraft specifications. "What's my role in the mission, sir?" "You'll be our primary visual observer. We'll have radar tracking and telemetry, but we need human eyes on the aircraft throughout the flight. At those speeds, things can go wrong incredibly quickly. A structural failure or engine problem might only be visible for seconds before it becomes catastrophic." The pilot chosen for the record attempt was Major Rebecca Torres, a veteran test pilot with over 2,000 hours in experimental aircraft. She was known for her calm demeanor under pressure and her ability to handle aircraft that other pilots couldn't fly. Marcus met with Major Torres several times before the flight to understand exactly what she would be experiencing. "At maximum speed," she explained, "I'll be traveling about 1 mile every second. The entire record run will last only about 10 minutes, but those will be the most intense 10 minutes of my life." The preparation for the record attempt took weeks. Marcus worked with a team of engineers to position multiple observation posts along the flight path. He tested various optical equipment and familiarized himself with every detail of the planned route. The Night Falcon would take off from Edwards, climb to 50,000 feet, then accelerate along a carefully planned course that would take it over the Mojave Desert. The actual speed record would be measured over a 15-mile section of the flight path. 3 days before the scheduled attempt, Marcus participated in a full dress rehearsal using a conventional aircraft flying the same route at normal speeds. He practiced tracking the aircraft from multiple observation points and coordinating with the mission controllers. During the rehearsal, Marcus noticed something that concerned him. At one point along the flight path, there was a slight atmospheric distortion that created unusual visual effects. It wasn't dangerous, but it could make aircraft tracking more difficult. He brought his observations to Colonel Mitchell. "Sir, there's a heat mirage effect at approximately the halfway point of the speed course. It might interfere with visual tracking during the actual flight." The colonel reviewed Marcus's report and decided to adjust the flight path slightly to avoid the problem area. It was a small change, but it demonstrated the value of having someone with Marcus's observational skills on the team. The morning of the record attempt was perfect for flying. Clear skies, minimal wind, and excellent visibility stretched for hundreds of miles. Marcus was positioned at the primary observation post, a specialized facility with powerful telescopes and communication equipment. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, Major Torres fired up the Night Falcon's engines. Even from 3 miles away, Marcus could hear the distinctive whine of the scramjet power plant. It was unlike any aircraft sound he had ever heard. The takeoff was smooth and routine. Major Torres climbed steadily to altitude while Marcus tracked her progress through high-powered binoculars. Everything looked normal as she reached 50,000 feet and began her approach to the speed course. "Ghost Eye, this is Night Falcon," came Major Torres's voice over the radio. "Beginning acceleration run. Current speed Mach 1.5 and climbing." Marcus focused all his attention on the distant aircraft. At first, it was just a tiny speck against the blue sky. But as the speed increased, the visual characteristics changed dramatically. "Mach 2.0, reported Major Torres. "All systems nominal." Marcus could see a faint vapor trail beginning to form behind the aircraft. The scramjet engine was starting to reach its design parameters. "Mach 3.0, entering the record course now." This was where Marcus's skills became critical. The aircraft was now moving faster than any human-piloted vehicle in history, except for the space shuttle. At these speeds, even tiny problems could become catastrophic within seconds. Marcus watched through his telescope as the Night Falcon streaked across the desert. He could barely track it even with his enhanced visual abilities. The aircraft was a blur of motion, visible for only fractions of a second at a time. Mach 4.0, called Major Torres. Her voice was strained but controlled. Some vibration developing in the airframe. Marcus saw it before the instruments registered the problem. A tiny flutter in the aircraft's exhaust plume indicated that something was wrong with the engine system. "Night Falcon, this is Ghost Eye," Marcus radioed immediately. "I'm seeing irregularities in your exhaust pattern. Recommend you monitor engine temperature closely." Major Torres checked her instruments. "Confirmed, Ghost Eye. Engine temperature rising above normal parameters." The mission controller's voice came over the radio. "Night Falcon, you're approaching Mach 5.0. Do you want to continue the record attempt?" There was a long pause before Major Torres responded. Marcus could imagine the decision she was facing. Abort the mission now. And months of preparation would be wasted. Continue, and she might be risking her life. Continuing the run, she decided. Mach 5.0 and still climbing. Marcus never took his eyes off the distant aircraft. Through his telescope, he could see that the exhaust plume was becoming more irregular. The engine was operating at the very edge of its design limits. "Mach 5.05, reported Major Torres. "Maximum record speed achieved. Beginning deceleration sequence." But Marcus saw something that made his blood freeze. A tiny bright spot appeared on the aircraft's fuselage near the engine inlet. It lasted only a fraction of a second, but he knew what it meant. "Night Falcon, emergency!" Marcus shouted into his radio. "You have a fire developing in your engine compartment. Shut down immediately." Major Torres reacted instantly, cutting engine power and beginning emergency procedures. Within seconds, the aircraft's fire warning systems confirmed what Marcus had already seen. The next few minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He watched through his telescope as Major Torres skillfully glided the powerless aircraft toward Edwards Air Force Base. Without engine power, she had only one chance to land safely. From his observation post, Marcus provided continuous updates on the aircraft's condition. He could see that the fire had been extinguished when the engine shut down, but there was visible damage to the fuselage. "Runway in sight," Major Torres reported as she lined up for her approach. "Ghost Eye, what do you see from your position?" Marcus focused his telescope on the approaching aircraft. "Landing gear appears to be functioning normally. I can see some heat damage near the engine, but the overall structure looks intact." The Night Falcon touched down smoothly and rolled to a stop on the runway. Emergency vehicles surrounded it immediately, but Major Torres climbed out unharmed. She had successfully completed the most dangerous flight in aviation history. Later analysis would show that Marcus's early warning had prevented a catastrophic engine explosion that could have destroyed the aircraft and killed the pilot. The fire had been caused by a fuel system malfunction that occurred at exactly Mach 5.7, just short of the Mach 6 goal. But the official speed of Mach 5.7 was still a new world record, surpassing the previous mark by a huge margin. More importantly, the flight had demonstrated that atmospheric speeds approaching Mach 6 were possible with the right technology. At the post-flight celebration, Major Torres sought out Marcus personally. "Ghost Eye," she said, "you saved my life today. I never would have seen that fire until it was too late." Colonel Mitchell made a short speech praising the entire team, but he singled out Marcus for special recognition. "Officer Williams demonstrated today why human observation remains irreplaceable, even in our age of advanced technology. His quick thinking and exceptional visual skills prevented what could have been a tragedy." From that day forward, Marcus became a legend in the test pilot community. Pilots from around the world requested him for their most dangerous flights. Engineers consulted him on new aircraft designs. His ability to see problems before instruments could detect them made him one of the most valuable people in experimental aviation. The supply officer, who had once been mocked for asking too many questions, was now known throughout the Air Force as the man who could see the impossible. His nickname, Ghost Eye, became synonymous with safety and excellence in flight testing. Marcus never forgot the lesson he had learned during his confrontation with Colonel Richardson. Doing the right thing, even when it was difficult or unpopular, was always worth the risk. His willingness to stand up for what he believed had not only saved his own career, but had led him to discover abilities he never knew he possessed. Years later, when young officers asked him for advice, Marcus always told them the same thing. Trust your instincts, speak up when something seems wrong, and never be afraid to ask questions. Sometimes the person who sees things differently is the one who sees things correctly. The Night Falcon program continued for several more years, eventually achieving its goal of sustained Mach 6 flight. But everyone involved agreed that the most important moment in the program's history was when a former supply officer spotted a potentially catastrophic problem that no instrument could detect, saving a pilot's life and keeping the dream of hypersonic flight alive.